This is another review, a huge review done up to 1990. Again, the same thing. The majority of research shows that kids in regular education do better. This is a study of the whole of the Dutch education system. 40,000 children, 5,000 were totally segregated. They were expecting that this special education would come out best, and that was the reason for the actual study being put together. And again, what they found is students in special education do less well than those in mainstream. The longer the child's in segregated education, the bigger the gap. They actually go backwards. Less favourable anyway, they got more social skills. Well, no difference actually. There was individual differences, as you would expect, across 40,000 children. And the other thing was the degree of specialist care, that's the OT and physio and so forth, made no difference. I'll go back to that if anyone wants to, but it's an instant finding. What about the effect of, well, if they're included for art and football or something, but we're taken out for special classes in reading and mathematics. You've heard that story? Sounds perfect, doesn't it? Doesn't work. The kids who are fully included have higher grades, better results in standardised tests, just overall come out with a better thing. Kids who are included do better. Okay, what about the other kids? Now there's increasing data coming out now that inclusive schools are the best academic schools. Because what happens is the teachers start to adapt their lessons for the kids with a disability, and lo and behold, there's a whole lot of kids who didn't get it, all of a sudden get it. Did you have that experience at school? Sometimes you just didn't get it? Well, this is actually starting to push teachers into really explaining well, and the whole school goes up. Large benefits with disabilities. What about the other kids? The presence of kids with severe disabilities had no effect on teachers' allocated time. There's another myth that this is a review study. Time lost to interruptions is not greater in the inclusive classrooms. Now that doesn't mean a kid can't read a classroom. I can find you lots of the kids who can read classrooms. Most of them haven't got a disability though. What's the impact on other children? No reduction in the academic children. So in other words, it doesn't muck up the other kids' academic fit, and they don't pick up undesirable behaviours from the other kids. This is a huge study around, they looked at 7,000 articles and actually came down to, I think it was 126 that they looked at in great detail. 81% of the outcomes reported positive and neutral effect. In other words, these kids have a good effect on schools, not a negative effect on schools. Oh. Now that's the important one. We've been through this research now for about 15 years. I've presented papers in international conferences. We actually published this finding. I've written to every professor of education in Australia with these findings and said, can you find an article compare segregation and inclusion that comes out in favour of segregation? No one could come up with one. Isn't that extraordinary? The whole special education is based on a myth that it's better. It just isn't there. The data just ain't there. Okay, just the law, I think most of you know, the law has now changed since 1992. I reckon we should have got it together by now, don't you? It's 16 years to get it together. I won't go into the law at the moment. So what do we say it's needing? As a part of the debate, the will and the skill. But the thing that I just want to talk a little, the third thing is the capacity. And that's basically the teal, isn't it? About what's actually involved. So let's just think about that a little bit. Okay, okay. That's right. What was said is in terms of inclusion, what do we need? We need the child physically present in the classroom the same as all the other children. It doesn't cost anything, does it? There's no cost in that. Social inclusion, for the child to be socially belonging, there's no cost in that, is there? That just means a reorganisation of school, putting a little bit of attention and thought on it. In terms of curricular inclusion, yes, there is some cost. because you've actually got to work out how to actually include this child who can't talk in the statistics class. That's a challenge. We're getting pretty good at that. There's some wonderful work coming out of the University of Oregon on that. And we're seeing some terrific examples, including in Queensland. I saw a teacher in Emerald who had some terrific stuff in Queensland. So there's some good stuff around on that. So there is some cost there. In terms of relevant skills, what are the relevant skills to be learned at school? Well, it's called the curriculum, isn't it? Isn't that what we say is relevant for kids to learn? No cost there, except we now need to work out how we do it and teach it more powerfully. Yes, teachers are going to need to be taught how to teach better. I think that's a general thing. We're now teaching to diverse populations. The child's self-image and the image in the eyes of others doesn't cost any money, does it? That needs some thought about how we actually do that. And expectations, that doesn't cost anything. So if we look at actually what's going on there, there's not a huge amount of area, apart from teacher training, where it's actually going to mean a bit of cost, and obviously some ramps and things. But that's just an interesting little cartoon. That's what we don't mean about inclusion. The island in the mainstream. That's on-site segregation, isn't it? Maybe that's even worse than being segregated if you just have your nose rubbed in the fact that you're not actually included. So we're not talking about that. But I want to talk about a new paradigm, and this comes into the funding thing, and something to think about. Is that the current model? The child has an impairment, so we test the child, we're going to get an ascertainment, or that's actually changing over here, I gather, but it's still the same sort of basic idea. Something wrong with the child, and then we've got to work out from the child what we do. Is that the current model? And so we test, segregate until the child's fixed, supposedly. Now I'm suggesting there's a new model that we need to look at. The child still has an impairment, that doesn't go away. But what we need to do is assess the environment. Now think about that in terms of funding implications. All the money currently goes attached to a child. You know, he needs 0.8 of an aid or something, and this becomes the actual thing. That's not inclusive. That's actually isolating the child as being someone different. What we're actually moved to in WA, and I certainly recommend that we think about this generally, is the money goes to the school. You have 400 children, you get this amount of money, you determine how that money is actually allocated, and the money's been boosted to incorporate children with a disability. That's an inclusive policy. You see how there's a different sort of funding. So in terms of what I would say there, in terms of the till, yes, the till is important, but maybe much more important is how we actually dole out that money in the system. Thank you.